Madam Deputy Speaker, there is agreement across the House that victims of crime should be more empowered and better supported. Indeed, I should recognise that the current Justice Secretary has promised to deliver a bill of his own. So did his predecessor, and so too did his predecessor's predecessor. They were promises to Parliament, but promises were also made to the public. The last 3 Tory manifestos pledged a law for victims. So the challenge we face isn't getting government to admit there's a problem, it's getting them to do something about it. This is a deadly serious issue with deadly serious consequences for delay. In the time that's passed since the Tories first promised a victims bill, there have been 1 million sexual offences, 350,000 rapes. Because of the broken promises of this government, none of those victims of terrible crime benefited from the statutory rights that they had been promised. We know a bill is on the government's to-do list, but it is not on their priority list. It is for Labour, which is why we've produced a bill for us today. Its origins lie in the work undertaken by Claire Waxman, the Victims Commissioner for London, and my right honourable friend, the member for Holborn and St Pancras. Their pioneering legislative work for victims is reflected in today's bill. Confidence in our system of justice is at an all-time low for victims. Trial failures due to victim issues is at an all-time high, trebling since 2015. Victims are increasingly dropping out of the criminal proceedings. When they look to the future, they see no justice in sight, no hope of closure, so they give up. To these victims, failed by government, no justice is better than the agony of false hope. Just as bad, too many victims say their experience of the criminal justice system was even more traumatising than the crime itself. Surely the most damning indictment imaginable of current policy. Victims have had codified rights since 2003, which have been reviewed, updated, extended several times, including at present. Government is committed to putting those rights on a statutory footing. The Labour Party agrees, and it's an important part. We do it in Part 3, Section 6 of the bill before us today. But this bill goes much further because victims need more than rights. They need the tools to uphold them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've never met anybody working in any part of the criminal justice system that doesn't care about victims. From first responders to High Court judges, people have empathy for victims of crime. They care. But individual empathy all too often fails to translate into organisational recognition of victim needs. The people aren't the problem, but the system is, and perverse incentives run through it like letters in a stick of rock. By giving power that matters to victims, modernising our justice system to reflect the value and needs of victims, and inserting consequence for failure into the system, this bill makes victims unignorable. Right now, under this government, victims and their needs are ignored, and routinely so. There exists a code of rights, but what happens if they're ignored? Nothing. If we did as the government aspires, which is to simply put the code onto statute, then what will happen if the code is ignored then? Still, nothing. Laws only matter if there is a consequence for breaking them, and the same must be true for a victims' law. That's why Part 3, Section 5 of this bill will create a register held by the Victims Commissioner onto which all individuals named as responsible for a breach of Victims' Code must be placed. Any part of the criminal justice system seeking to make an appointment in the top decile of salaries must consult the register. They can see if any applicants have previously failed to uphold victims' rights. We don't bar recruitment, but doubtless it will be taken into account. But the message is clear. For the first time, there will be consequences for those who ignore victims. For the first time, failing victims will have a career-limiting impact. For rights to have meaning, people need to know they exist. Today, all too often, that just simply isn't the case. 80% of people who suffer crime make their way through the criminal justice system totally unaware there is a code of rights. Right now, there is no fixed point in time when a victim is informed of their rights. There should be, but when? Alleged perpetrators are read their essential rights at the point of arrest, but the victim isn't informed of their rights at the point of becoming a victim. This imbalance needs addressing. This bill places a requirement that victims must be informed of their essential rights at the earliest possible opportunity. The clear expectation of the bill is that the moment of first response is usually the appropriate time to inform victims that they have the right to information, support, and a comprehensive set of legally enforceable rights to support them as victims. For those who think this is too soon, answer the following question. If the moment of becoming a victim isn't the right time to discover you have legally enforceable rights, that you have power, then when is? After a week? Month? Or as it is now for most victims? Never. A powerful code of rights needs a powerful commission to hold the system to account. Dame Vera Baird in Dame Vera Baird, we have a fearless commissioner, but this bill seeks to boost further the Commission's power and authority. The Labour Party doesn't fear statutory bodies with independence. We believe it strengthens our democracy. That's why this bill shifts reporting from ministers to Parliament, gives Justice Select Committee power of veto over future Commissioner appointments, and grants extended freedoms to investigate the criminal justice system and ensure code compliance. This bill also gives power directly to victims. For them, things will be different. No longer will they need an MP to authorise a victim's complaint to the Parliamentary Ombudsman, an inexcusable barrier which partly explains why less than 20 victims have lodged complaints in the past 3 years, an insulting number considering the scale of violations. Persistent victims of antisocial behaviour will for the first time be embraced by the code, empowering people to stand up against those who play havoc with the civility everyone has the right to expect from their neighbours and from within their community. Right now, only a minority of victims understand their rights, and a fraction will ever exert them. The system ignores infraction, so over time it has become normalised. With this bill, we modernise our system of justice to take into account their rights and the need of victims. Not only will the measures in this bill lessen the impact of crime on victims, it will help improve the quality of justice itself by delivering victims in their role as witnesses into courtrooms empowered with knowledge, rights and support. It's not radical, we don't tear down old liberties, but it marks the only significant step forward for almost 2 decades. We insert career-limiting consequences into the system that currently ignores victims with impunity. We empower victims with the knowledge of their rights from the moment they become victims. We make it easier for those rights to be understood and asserted, and more straightforward to appeal should the need arise. We give victims an enforcer with teeth in the shape of a commissioner with independence, power and resources to hold the criminal justice system to account on a victim's behalf. And a criminal justice system that better reflects the aspirations of our society, for a justice system that offers dignity and support to those who suffer at the hands of criminals and not, as is all too often the case today, prolongs the agony. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Oh, come on. Aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, David Lammy, Nick Thomas-Symonds, Rachel Reeves, Valerie Vaz, Nick Brown, Jess Phillips, Holly Lynch, Wes Streeting, Yvette Cooper and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Ooh. It is indeed. Second reading, what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.